The survivors of Jeffrey Epstein's abuse have been pressing Congress to release all government files on the late sex trafficker. In September, they spoke on Capitol Hill in favor of the discharge petition to force a floor vote on releasing the files. Just 2 weeks later, Speaker Mike Johnson sidestepped the issue entirely by effectively suspending the entire House from all business for nearly 2 months. The survivors have not let up. With the House now back in session, some of the women attended Arizona Democratic Congresswoman Adelita Grijalva's extremely delayed swearing in last night. They were there when Congresswoman Grijalva became, as she promised, the final vote needed on that discharge petition. Their efforts have paid off. The House will hold a vote on releasing the Epstein files next week. So the survivors plan to be back on Capitol Hill next Tuesday for a press conference held by the leaders of the discharge petition effort, Republican Thomas Massie and Democrat Ro Khanna, as well as Republican Marjorie Taylor Greene, in order to keep pressuring the government to release the information. Eric Fudali is an attorney representing 11 of Epstein's accusers, and he joins me now. It's good to have you here at the table. In your role as an attorney for 11 of these women, their reaction to the success of this effort to force a vote?
There's real hope, there's real optimism, but you have to remember that for decades, these survivors have been wronged every step of the way by not just this administration, past administrations, past departments of justice, past, FBI's, this one step after another, 90s, 2000s, they just keep getting wronged. They keep thinking there's going to be justice, and then Epstein kills himself. They think keeping there's going to be justice, then Ghislaine Maxwell goes to a minimum security resort. They think they're going to get justice in 2008, and then Jeffrey Epstein gets a slap on the wrist. So there's hope, there's optimism, but there's a little hesitance, not getting too ahead of ourselves.
Let's talk about the Maxwell part, because you just brought it up. I mean, it is truly an appalling spectacle to me that the one individual other than Jeffrey Epstein who's ever been actually convicted in a court of law with due process, jury of peers, the whole thing of colluding and collaborating with his abuse is now in a minimum security prison. This is I'm citing a letter by Jamie Raskin citing a whistleblower account that she's received customized meals personally delivered to her cell, after hours time in a private exercise area, access to a service puppy. What is that? How is that? I'm sure the women you represent know about this, and what is the reaction?
I think you said it well. Appalling is a good word for it. I would even go further and say it's been re-victimizing for them. Like you said, this is the one person. The one person. The only person who's ever seen any accountability or justice. And you can't forget what she was actually convicted of. This just wasn't trafficking. She was convicted of child sex trafficking. Tricking women, girls as young as 14 years old, tricking them, plying them, getting them into Jeffrey Epstein's orbit so that he could rape them. That's what she was convicted of. It is so appalling. And I think what it shows is that there's not just two tiers of justice here in the United States. We have always heard, justice for the poor is different than justice for the rich. We have a third tier. True. We have a third tier now, and it's justice for those who are friends with Donald Trump. And that's what I think this is showing. Ghislaine Maxwell is someone who said nice things about Donald Trump, was given a platform to deny things that now have been proven distrue. And what happened? She ends up in a minimum security resort, playing with puppies, getting private meals, meeting with her friends. I mean, there isn't a word to describe how frustrated and how angry the survivors are at this.
One of the other parts of the files that is of particular interest, and I mentioned it in the A, which I really feel like we never got the story on, and was the reason for the scandal to reappear in the public imagination, is the decision by Alex Acosta, when he was the U.S. attorney in the Southern District of Florida, to essentially give him a slap on the wrist, to drop 50 possible federal charges in exchange for one local charge, and half a day in prison every day for however period of time. My understanding is one of the women you represent was actually victimized by Epstein, right after that fateful decision.
That's absolutely correct. She was victimized in 2009 by Jeffrey Epstein, which means literally, had Alex Acosta done his job, had that Department of Justice really not ignored the 60 or so victims that they ignored, one step further, what Alex Acosta did is he wrote an email to the other prosecutors on the case telling them not to inform the victims about the plea deal. That is outrageous.
A violation of law, in fact, which is what produced the suit.
And ethics. I was a prosecutor for about a year. I learned that in that year, that you always tell the victims what the plea deal is going to be. So, had he done his job, not only could have saved my client, he could have saved so many clients. And think about it, that's a law enforcement officer's dream. Catch a sexual predator, in the act, basically. Have a career case. He barely slapped him on the wrist, let him go on, and let him continue to abuse for another decade until finally he was arrested again and ultimately, killed himself under federal custody suspiciously. So it's appalling that he hasn't been, subpoenaed to testify under Congress. I think he's the one person we need to hear from.
Yeah, and one of those victims, Epstein in 2009 was still on probation, basically, right?
Correct. He was wearing an ankle bracelet. Yeah,
he was physically wearing an ankle bracelet when he assaulted your client.
He was, and all of him and his friends, she asked about it. Him and his friends just sort of laughed it off. Oh, I got into some trouble. She was trafficked here from Eastern Europe. She had no idea what it meant, under the guise of a modeling contract. It's just the level of corruption and the level of just sort of not caring about what might happen, not caring about the victims, not caring about who this man was and what he's capable of is so appalling and really, I think, calls the American people to really question, what is going on in our justice system? Even as we move here today, what is happening? The president of the United States, he went from just sort of not releasing the files to a campaign of protecting and keeping these files secret of the most prolific predator of our time. It's just astounding.
There are, of course, many mentions of Trump in the files. Him talking about the dog that hasn't barked, talking about I have photos of him, the girls in bikinis, that he says, of course, he knew about the girls as he asked Ghislaine to stop. But broader than that, obviously, you don't have any particular insight into that relationship, I don't think, based on who you're representing. It's also just it's not like it's not known by all the high-flying people who were emailing with him after his conviction. He even sort of, at some points, Epstein kind of jokes about it.
It's sort of disgusting how brazen Jeffrey Epstein and his cronies, if you will, were about this. Just so, when he references girls, you have to remember, we think of girls. Okay, when he's saying girls, he means basically my sex slaves that I have trafficked, that I am holding financial power over, that I'm threatening with visas, that I'm threatening with their life and their family's life if they ever go away from me or report me. It's so jarring to read these and see how brazen they are.
Yeah, girls is not right. And he also means girls in, as I said before, he means girls in the literal sense of underage, 14, and girls in the colloquial sense of you're going to come by with some girls, meaning young women who are of age. And one of the things I think is important for people to realize, and I think this is true of your clients, is it wasn't the predation crossed across the 18-year-old barrier. There were women that were sexually assaulted who were women, but were still trafficked and sexually assaulted repeatedly.
Absolutely. What I think is underreported is the way Jeffrey Epstein controlled his victims. What he did is he used power, but it wasn't the same for every girl. Sometimes the power was just that she was underage and didn't know better. Sometimes it was financial power. He'd find, young women or girls who were down and out and needed money, and he would use that power. Sometimes he'd literally bring in women from overseas, escape, poor countries, come to the United States under a visa, a modeling visa or something, and then he'd use that visa over them. Sometimes he'd be as bold as to sort of show them pictures of him and very wealthy, powerful people, including Donald Trump, and threaten them and make real threats to them and their family.
I know these people.
Yeah, I've spoke to my clients who are survivors, and they still live in fear of Jeffrey Epstein, even knowing he's dead.
Eric Fudali, who represented 11 of the women who were abused by Jeffrey Epstein. Thank you.
Thanks.